everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Streamlining Vendor Model Workflows, Repeatable Solutions for Time-Consuming Repetitive Tasks. This webinar is brought to you by Applied Software GRAITEC Group. My name is Misty Scott, and I am pleased to be your moderator. We'll begin with a quick intro video on how to get the most out of this webinar and interact with us today. Here we go.
Welcome to this Applied Software GRAITEC Group webinar. We are glad you could join us today. Get more out of the webinar by clicking on the icons at the bottom of the screen. This one leads to resources, this one adjusts the volume. Be sure to find Applied Software GRAITEC Group online at asti.com, where we are helping you model the future. This webinar is being recorded for your convenience. You will be receiving an email with a recording link for future reference.
Okay, and you can find a schedule of upcoming events, webinars, training on our calendar at asti.com/calendar. All right, before we get started, I'm excited to announce Applied Software has officially launched our Sustainability Scholarship Program. This essay contest is for high school students who would like to win a $1,000 college scholarship and a $500 reward for their high schools. If you'd like to learn more, you could scan the QR code on the screen or visit the link in the resources tab. All right, so before we get started, I wanted to let you guys know throughout the webinar, feel free to plug any of your questions in the chat box. We find, as you think of them, throw them on in there. We find it best for us to visit it at the end of the webinar, but doesn't mean you have to wait till then, but it's a good transition for us to open up to Q&A. All right, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our speaker, Owen Whitehouse, and he can get things rolling.
Thanks for that. Yeah, hi, I'm Owen Whitehouse. I'm a solution architect at Applied Software, GRAITEC Group. I've got over 30 years in the industry, and I'm an enthusiastic promoter of efficient data use in plant design. I have a lot of years in the electrical field working with dielectric fluids and processing, and another few years in the biofuels industry, putting a lot of facilities in the ground, and another 10 years in the reseller channel. So I got a lot of experience around this field. Looking forward to showing you some new content and some tips and tricks to streamline your workflows. So today we're going to demonstrate and discuss some workflows for making your use of vendor-provided models more consistent, faster, and easier. To do that, we're going to review some optimized processes for simplifying your history-based models. We'll take a look at an innovative way to control the level of detail your plant models display. We'll get an overview of the use of PowerPack's exciting manufacturer reference tool for making model references easy. And we'll take some time to answer your questions afterwards. So with that said, let's dive right into the first part of this, which is working on simplifying your history-based models. Okay, for this process, we're going to use Autodesk Inventor Professional 2024. And I'm by no means an expert with Inventor, but I have been using it often enough for these sorts of workflows that I've developed some tools and methodologies in the software that I think would really benefit other users who haven't actually worked with models in this way. So one of the things I like to recommend is that you bring just about everything that you get from your vendors into Inventor in one way or another. So what I mean by that is you can import them directly, whether they're actually an Inventor file, so an IAM or IPT, or if they're a step file, or if they're SolidWorks assembly. It doesn't really matter. Inventor works pretty well for bringing those in. So I do recommend just making it a kind of a key component of your workflow when you're bringing in vendor models. And I'm going to use an example model I've got here. So let's just go ahead and open this up. This has already been brought in as an Inventor assembly. So if I open this, you can see that we've got a a model of a piece of process equipment here. This is a pulp press. And you notice over here in the model tree that we've got a lot of I-parts in here, so IPTs. So these are all the individual components of this assembly. And notice that Inventor does something interesting here. It hasn't actually fully loaded this thing. It's actually just sort of partially loaded it. And you can tell that by looking right over here where it says load full in this express button. And what that means is this model is just kind of being shown in a fast loading representative view. So that's fine, but it's not going to allow us to do some of the work we want to do with it. So if we look over here in the simplify button, you can see that that is grayed out and that's not available for us. So we've got to change that. We've got to do something to make that available, and that is to hit this load full. So let's go ahead and click that, and you can see it's just running through right now, and it's actually fully referencing all the constituent parts of this assembly. And now that it's done so, now we can get at this simplification. So if you're in Assemble, in the Assemble ribbon here in Inventor Pro, it should be right over here on the far right-hand side. And this tool has changed over the years. It used to be called shrink wrap, and it just keeps getting better. With every iteration of Inventor, I'm a little more pleased with what it does. So I think you're going to enjoy what we do here. There's some things that I really do like. So before I dive into the simplification process, there's one thing I do like to correct with these models before I go too much further, and that is its position in space. So often when you bring these models in from a vendor, they're arranged in such a way that they maybe don't represent how they should be aligned to your model or a real-world coordinate system. And that's not too hard to fix in Inventor, but you just have to remember to do it. And I don't have any automation or workflow around that. You just have to remember to come over here to the view cube and hit the little drop down. And then we'll go to options. So this will bring up a dialog that lets us review what our view cube orientation is. And this has a lot to do with how this model is going to be shown in space. Now, this one looks like it's set correctly, but often they're not. And I really do like to have my front view plane set to something that makes sense. So actually, no, this one isn't right. So let's hit this drop down. And so for my front view, I typically like that to be with X and Z, so that I'm looking at the XZ plane with positive Y. So, and if I do that, that actually automatically switches my top view plane to be X and Y with a positive Z. So that is what we want. So go ahead and hit OK there. And then sometimes if things don't look right, you can go in here and hit your reset front, and it'll fix it. And there you can see that maybe your orientation has changed now. So if we go to the top view, that's exactly the way I like this one to be. So let's put it back on the top view. Get it rotated kind of around the way I want. Oops, that wasn't quite the way I wanted there. Let's go to the front. There we go. So that looks more like what I'm expecting to see. And if you look down in here at your the UCS icon, you can see we've got positive X, positive Y, maybe not quite in the right orientations that you would be expecting, but at least your Z is positive. So that's good. We're happy with that. So the next part of this is simplification. Once you've got the orientation corrected, let's go ahead and hit the simplify button. And this is where things have gotten so much better. I'm really pleased with this. And there are a lot of options in here to deal with, but it's important to keep in mind that these are now able to be stored and reused over and over again. And that's the real takeaway from what we're going to be learning here in the next few minutes, is that once you have a set of options developed to remove content from your model, we're able to store these now, and we'll go through that in just a second. But first thing I want to do is I want to review one of the presets I already have here. I have a low detail preset. So what that means is I'm trying to strip out as much content from this thing as I can to make it as simple as I can to share with Plant 3D. Because Plant 3D, especially if you're going to use multiple instances of this thing, is really going to need to have this file be as small as possible. To do that, I'm going to go through a lot of these settings here. I'll leave replace with envelopes alone. This is your most extreme version of the simplification tools. So you can see here that it's absolutely just, knocking all the detail out of it and replacing it with either orthogonal boxes or a minimum bounding box. So I don't typically use that. It's normally too much. The other thing I like to do is I like to go in and exclude parts by size. And this one's kind of fun. You have to play with it. But while you're doing it, you can hit this little button right here to show excluded parts. So you can change the size, and depending on the units, this can be in inches or millimeters. But as you pick your various sizes, you can see that you can hit this button here, and it shows you the stuff that's going to be excluded from your model. And there might be instances where you've overdone it, like perhaps you've gotten too aggressive with it, and so once you get to a certain size, you're not satisfied with how that looks, and this can show you that very quickly. The other thing this does is if you need to put something back in, if there's say I really did need that component right there, you can click on it and it'll actually put it back in. So for some of these nozzles and things like that, I do want those to remain available to me. So I'll go back and I'll just click those, and that way those will stay in the final result. So again, take a little time and work on that. And then typically for the low detail, I go ahead and remove nearly all of these holes, chamfers, all of this. Now, if I go hit this preset, again, it'll reset these, and that's what I've got, is I've got all holes, all of these removed. And then it's just simply a matter of going ahead and choosing where you're going to save the resulting IPT file. Now, this is the workflow. We do have to go through this process to create the IPT file first. So just keep in mind that that is a step in this process. But the main takeaway I want to call your attention to here is the fact that once you've got these settings for a particular component or piece of equipment done, it's often going to be a reality that your vendor might provide you with multiple instances or multiple versions of this file as you go through your design process. And so rather than having to configure all this again, what I like to do is I like to go hit this plus, and it's going to allow me to save a new preset. So sometimes if you know that this is going to be, say, MX 1001, you could say this would be a low detail, and you can save that now. And so now we've got a very focused set of configurations to strip the detail out of this particular model. So at this point, I would go ahead and knock out all or change the file name, and then we'll allow this this configuration to run to simplify this. So I'm just going to put this one. Let's see here. I'll put it right here. I'll change the name, and if we wanted to do this like MX 1001, something like that. And we'll go ahead and hit OK here. And you can see it's creating a new part. Apologize, it looks like it's clipping off part of that dialog. Give it just a minute to run here. And there we go. there's our much reduced content simplified model. So a lot of those holes, all the internals are stripped out. Still got a fair amount of detail on it. It looks pretty good. It's still fairly representative of what the original model was, but again, it's going to be quite a lot smaller. But we're not quite done yet. This is still as an IPT file, and in many instances to work with Plant 3D, you're going to want to export this as a DWG file. So you can do that up here from the Save As, and again, it's cutting that off. But you can do a Save As or export to a different CAD format. So export it to DWG. So that is a step in the process that you'll want to do. Again, apologies, it looked like it cut those dialogues off for you, so you probably didn't see them. But there is an option when you hit the File drop down for this export to do a different CAD format or export to DWG. So that's typically the workflow that we see. Now, that isn't always true, though, with our new GRAITEC Power Pack for Plant 3D. We've got some interesting features to discuss with you there, but we'll get to that in just a little bit. So again, we're not quite done. Even if we do have this as saved or in our Inventor session as an IPT, we're not quite done. We still have to hit this Save button, and there's going to be some dialogues come up and say that things need to be saved, and then we'll just go ahead and hit OK. But I've already got a version of this to work with, so I won't go through that process and tie up our time. So I'll go ahead and hit Cancel here, and so that's, again, the big takeaway here on this is when you're working with a vendor model that you know is going to come in multiple times, to use the Simplify tool and to save yourself some presets. This is the big time savings, in my opinion, here, because then once you've spent some time playing with this and adjusting what you need, you don't want to have to go through that work again. Okay, moving over into Plant 3D, I want to talk about an innovative little workflow that I've developed that I use to change the level of detail that I display in my Plant 3D models. So this is something that Plant 3D doesn't offer natively, and I've had to kind of work out some systems for doing this over time that make it easier for me to change how much content is displayed and what the level of complexity is. So the reason I do this is because for some clients, the ask is they want to see models that look extremely realistic. But in reality, for me to get my work done, I can't have those models in there. I can't cut orthos with those models. It's too much. So I've kind of come up with this workflow that works really well for allowing me to swap that content out. So let's take a look at that and let's just see how it works. So I'm going to go ahead and open up a piping model here. It's a very simple one just to help illustrate the workflow. So I've just got a simple piece of pipe here, and we've got some large ball valves in place. So these are 12-inch ball valves, and I've got a realistic looking actuator on top of these. Now, I haven't used the catalogs and specs to insert these actuators because I'm going to do something a little bit special with these. Now, granted, you would probably prefer to have those in the catalog, but for other reasons that you're about to see, I just kind of avoid it, and we're doing it this way. So again, this is just kind of a tip and trick that I've used over the years, so you can see how this goes shortly. So these are actually inserted as references. So I've dropped these in, and they are actually referenced from a very specific folder structure. And this is where things get a little more complicated, but once you see how it works, I think it'll make a lot of sense to you. So let's go into my Windows Explorer session and just explain to you what I'm trying to do here. So when I get files from a vendor, I always keep a copy of the original, unaltered. And I put this in a file here, or in a folder called Original Files. Now, when I get to working on them in Inventor or whatever I'm going to do to simplify them, I usually try to do, again, just depending on what the client's requiring, either a full detail model or a low detail model or both. And in the instances where I want both, I always create this additional folder here called referenced. Now what this means is I will only reference my vendor models from this folder called referenced. And for my full detail and low detail models, they're essentially identical content. So I'll just jump between them here so you can see. So I've got my ball valve and in both places, so you can see I've got that ball valve gear wheel, and they're different sizes. So in the low detail it's 273. If I go over to the full detail for this ball valve gear wheel, you can see it's 760. So it's much larger, and this would impact performance, of course, when working with Plant 3D. So what I do is, just based on whichever one I want to use at a given point in time, I'll copy the file from either the full detail or the low detail, and I'll put it in the referenced directory. So right now, you can see I've got my ball valve gear wheel in here, and it's the large one. Now I haven't got anything in the file name to indicate which one it is, but you can see that just by looking at the size, it's the large one. So what that means is, in my model, I've got the full detail going on. So if I want to switch it, now I can just go back up to my low detail. I'll just simply copy the file that I'm looking to use. We'll go back to our referenced directory and just overwrite the file that I've got in there already. So replace the file in the destination. With that done, I can come back to Plant 3D now. I can just start my reference manager. And I'll just go to this because I know it needs to be reloaded. And once that's done, you can see I'm back to a much simplified version of that actuator. So kind of a simple way to do it, but it really does work well. And I've seen this used to the extent where the entire valve body is inserted as a reference, including the bolt sets and everything, because sometimes you get those with a vendor reference. And you can do that and show a really high level of detail, but it doesn't have to be permanent, and it's such a simple switch out to just swap that XREF and be able to change those files. So kind of a neat tool. All right, the third and final part of this webinar today and demonstration will be keeping that same train of thought with the replacement of vendor model files. We're going to actually use the Power Pack for Plant 3D, which is a new software from Applied Software GRAITEC that focuses on solving some issues and workflow shortcomings in Plant 3D. And the one we're going to look at here is called Manufacturer Reference. So I'm going to switch over to a different file here quickly, and we're going to use a combination of the Manufacturer Reference tool and that workflow with the folders to show you a pretty cool way of managing even more complicated models than just a little ball valve gear wheel actuator. So let's just dive right in. Let's start our Manufacturer Reference tool in the Power Pack for Plant 3D. Let's go ahead and import a new manufacturer reference. And what this lets me do is avoid that whole process of converting it to a DWG. I can directly consume content from a manufacturer, or if I want to just do a mildly simplified one, I can do that as well. And again, I'm going to stick with this folder structure wherein I have my referenced directory is the only thing I pull models from. These others, the original, full detail, and low detail, are just containers, and the referenced folder is going to be the one I use. So we'll go ahead and get this pulp press, and we're going to go ahead and pull this in. Give that a second to think about it. Usually doesn't take too long. There we go. And you can see I've got an instance of this pulp press in here already. So I'm going to close this dialog just for a second. And let's zoom and find our pulp press. Great. Switch my view here. Looks fantastic. Now you can see that this is the low detail one. So I'm inserting this in design as fairly low detail. I've got a lot of the content, the holes and everything are all stripped out of it. It's much simplified, which for 90% of my work is fine. That's how I want it. But I want to at sometimes show a client a really nice rendered model. So I'm gonna want to switch that back and forth between the low detail and the high detail one. So let's just put a couple more of these in here just for the sake of interest. So we'll start our copy command. And I don't really need a base point just because we're just copying and sort of arraying this thing. So we'll do one at 20 feet and let's do another one at 40 feet. All right, there we go. We've got our 3 instances of an Inventor iPart referenced directly into Plant 3D. So this is pretty cool. No, this is not a DWG. This is absolutely just its own thing. And let's go back to the manufacturer reference here quick, and you can see for each time I've copied it, it's dropped a new instance in the drawing. But we're not done yet. Another thing that I really like about this workflow is I can jump back over to the Home tab here, and I can add Plant 3D Intelligence to any of these objects. So I'm going to select this first one. I'll just say it's miscellaneous equipment. It requires an insertion point, so I'll just go get this the center point of this top flange here. Looks fine to me. And we'll just call this MX 1001 and assign. We can continue that process with the others if we like. We don't have to. This is just for sake of demonstration. But you can see now I've got multiple instances of this same reference. But the way this is configured, I can go ahead and give them different tag values. So now they're intelligent. If I go hover on them, you can see that it knows it's MX1001. Here's MX1002. If I go look in Data Manager, you'll see the same. And we've got two instances of that equipment in here. So there's the tag. All the info is right there. Looks great. And now for the fun part, if we go, or one of the fun parts anyway, if we go back to our manufacturer reference, you can see that it's still showing the instance names, but now it's also showing me the tag value as well. So as soon as I added some info to it, it's actually displaying it here. So I'll close this dialog one more time, and I'm going to go back over to my referenced folder. And I'm going to replace this with the high detail one because now it's time to do a rendering, or maybe I want to do some nice screen images or do a model review with the client and they want to see full detail. So I'll go over to the full detail. I'll find the high detail version of that same component. We're just going to copy that, jump back to my referenced folder, paste it in and replace it. There we go. It's been updated. And now if I come back over to my manufacturer reference dialog, I just hit the refresh button. You could even see that it said in the status that a new version was available. So give it a second to run through this here and replace that block instance. And now you can see it says everything is up to date. I'll close this dialog out, and now you can see that we've got a lot more detail showing again. And it replaced it on all 3 instances, and the intelligence is still there. It still knows it's a Plant 3D object. I can attach nozzles to it and do whatever I should need to do. So there you go. I hope those were helpful and useful tips and tricks More than happy to jump into the question and answer session now and take any questions you might have on how that works, or if you have questions on workflow or anything like that, just go ahead and unmute yourself or send a question into the chat or Q&A section of the tool we're in here for the On24 webinar, and I'll be happy to get you some answers. Thanks.
All right. So if you want to plug any questions you have in the chat box, it looks like we didn't have any throughout the webinar, which is sometimes a really great sign that it was straight and to the point. So as we wait for any questions to populate there, I want to let you guys know, if you think of any questions after the webinar, you didn't ask them, you can absolutely reach out to myself, mscott@asti.com. I will get you connected with the right expert, whether that be Owen or somebody else, and get you the answers that you need. We also are interested, if you wanted to suggest any topics that you'd like us to create webinars are, you could also email that to me as well. We love hearing feedback from you guys, and definitely want to bring the most valuable content to you in every webinar. Oh, and is there, while we're waiting to see if any questions are asked, is there a common question that you get asked whenever you present this type of content or this product to anybody through training or anything?
I wouldn't say there's any one particular question we get. I do, however, think it's really important, and probably one of the biggest time killers for Plant 3D designers is the uncontrolled utilization of vendor models. What often ends up happening is without some point of control in there, you've got pretty much every designer in the organization pulling in vendor files from wherever. And what ends up happening is those vendor files are often exceedingly complex, to the point where Plant 3D is forced to really struggle to do the tasks and activities that you're asking of it. So what happens is you end up grinding your system to a standstill. Like if you're going to try to generate an ortho or reference other models, it just it really has a dramatically impactful effect in your organization when you do that, bringing in all those uncontrolled models. Just the cost in time and money is more than you might ever realize. So that's why one of the reasons I really like this topic is that, with just a little bit of thought and a little bit of control around how you deal with these vendor models, you can dramatically improve your efficiency with Plant 3D, because the reality is almost all of us have to reference in process equipment, because that's really the definition of what Plant 3D does, is allow you to bring in all this process equipment and then connect it up with piping. So to that end, if you are doing it inefficiently with these references, that means the reference you brought in is the same reference that everyone else has to look at and deal with, and so you can really slow your company down and slow your project timelines down.
That's a really good point. I think we all need to, save time and be more efficient, and with less things that need to be changed, the less miscommunication you have. So I think you're absolutely right with that. Okay, so we don't have any questions in the chat, but I do want to thank you all for attending and spending time with us. We trust it was meaningful and impactful for you and your businesses, and we do look forward to seeing you on future webinars. And thank you so much, Owen.
Thank you, Misty.
Have a great day.
Bye-bye, everybody.